All right. We have a good one for you today. I have the legend, Pete Garcia, here on our show today. So he's just in the back having some coffee. And we're going to be talking about the title of this video today is called We Are Living on Borrowed Time. And that's how I feel. I feel like we're in that time where everything is just going crazy around us. AI is taking off, all kinds of stuff, wars, rumors of wars. And I watched the show the other day, Uncertain Times, with Lauren, Pete Garcia, and Tyler. The three of them were talking about this, and I thought, you know what, I got to have almost like a little bit of an encore presentation. I would like Pete to share a little bit more about maybe some of the things that they had talked about, and then I can share some of my insights as well, specifically in regards to AI, because I've read a lot of books in the last year. Anything beyond a year almost seems like these books become obsolete. So I think you guys are in for a real treat. So without any further ado, welcome to Black Swan Revelations.
You don't see it coming? Would you go as safe? Would you go as known? One silent shift shatters what you know. Like Swan. You won't see it coming. Like Swan. The shift is already moving. This is Black Swan Revelations.
All right, Mr. Pete Garcia, welcome to the show today. I don't think you've seen my opening yet, my new opening.
No, I haven't. That's brand new, so I like it.
Yeah, I created it a couple months ago before all the craziness, and it's interesting that everything I put in that video is basically pertains to this time. It's crazy, crazy. So how you been?
Busy, busier, put it that way. Yeah, it's been good though. I mean, we were chosen to live in this time. God, individually selected each person alive today to be here in this last generation, and it's a privilege and it's an honor to serve the Lord in this manner, and not just doing live streams, but writing and teaching and, serving in whatever capacity I can serve in. And I'm just thankful for the opportunity, and thankful for guys like you and the other channels out there that are trying to get the word out there and warn this lost and dying world that this age is about to come to an end, a very abrupt end. And so that's what we'll talk about tonight. And
yeah, that's awesome.
It'll hit somebody, and it'll make sense. It'll click.
Yeah, I think there's something special about being able to have a platform where you can actually have guests on. You can talk about things just like we're having a cup of coffee, a little cup of Black Swan coffee. What are you drinking today? What do you got?
What this is coffee do you like mushroom coffee.
Nice. And what? Yeah, mushroom coffee. What does it say on? Yeah, what does it say on your cup?
Oh, I got that from
that's your cup. That's your cup.
Kurt Reed. When we spoke in Vegas, it's been a few weeks now, 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago, they had made cups for each of the speakers there. So,
that's a neat idea.
Pretty nice.
I like that. Okay, so last week, actually just a few days ago, Lauren, Tyler, yourself, you're showing some charts about the idea of going all the way back to Adam to basically Jesus Christ being about 4,000 years. And then we're at that era right now where we're at about the 6,000 year marker, or we're approaching it. We're right in that window. Mm-hmm. And I thought it might be interesting to have a conversation as to why we feel like this is without date setting. why this seems to make the most sense versus 30 years ago or perhaps 30 years in the future. Why this seems to be like we're in that window. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was talking to Pastor Jason earlier, and I can't remember who I was talking to. I have these conversations all the time, so they kind of run together, but you know how that is. But I was like, talking about UFOs and all this stuff we were talking about. You couldn't even have that conversation 10 years ago with a serious discussion about it, because it was still considered, taboo or whatever. Same thing with AIs. I mean, look at how fast AI is advanced in just the last 2 years. It went from being like this novelty that, kids could use, and now it's like it's being incorporated into the government systems, military programs, and systems, and it's looking to replace, a significant portion of the workforce in the coming year. And, it's just, things are happening so exponentially now that it's really hard to keep up. And so I'm thankful for your channel and other channels that are out there, and people just taking that leap of faith and coming out there and sharing what the Lord's put on their heart. And we need more people. I mean, there's just too much for, as few watchmen as there are. It's too much information coming at us nonstop. And then you got to filter. This time you got to filter like 6 different ways to validate a story, even if it comes from a somewhat reputable platform or reputable source. I mean, there are so many different things happening. It's like we're like in this prophetic onion and all these different layers, and everybody's got, it's layer on top of layer on top of layer, of agendas and biases and programs and all this stuff. So it's really hard to keep up with everything. So I think too few churches are speaking about this, and people are hungry for information, so they're turning on the news or they're going to secular sources. So I think having the news filtered through the prophetic lens is important to try and make sense of what's happening.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And there's lots of good things to watch online that gets us distracted, like good things like I could be caught watching an iguana eat some kind of an animal and be like, wow, I never knew I was interested in that. And I'd swipe and swipe and swipe. So there's crazy things out there. And so with my audience, I'm like, you got to get in the Word first thing in the morning before the craziness gets out of control. Spend a couple of hours in the morning, make that your window of time that you can dive into the Bible. And then you have 22 hours to do all your research, to do whatever it is, go watch Netflix, binge watch, whatever, if you want to watch news or whatever. But don't watch the news at the expense of your time in the Word, because to me, nothing else matters. I have to have that first, and then I'm free to work, do whatever it is that you have to do, but you got 22 hours. Stay up late if you want, whatever it is. Because, man, I see so many people that are gravitating towards CNN, Fox, CTV, and everything, and you talk about Bible, and they're like, I don't know. What do you mean? Well, you've never heard about Joshua asking the sun and the moon to stand still for a day? It's like, oh, no, I'm not familiar with that story. Where is that? Is that in the book of Enoch, or is that the Ethiopian Bible? No, it's in the Bible. It's in the Old Testament. And they're like lost because they're watching Artemis 2 or they're watching Iran wars, and they have no time for the Bible.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I try to lead with all the time on my show is, hey, maybe I go crazy. I go down rabbit holes every once in a while with AI, doing a lot of research and stuff, but I don't do it at the expense of my devotional life. And that's how I try and approach everything. That way you're safe. You can actually climb back out of that rabbit hole.
What do you think of what do you think of listening to the Bible or listening to?
Love it. Yep. Triple down. Like I listen to the Bible and read at the same time with highlighters. Sometimes it's nice when you're driving. Sometimes it's nice when you get up to make yourself a cup of coffee and you're listening to it and then you come down. I also love the physical. I also have it on Kindle. Triple threat. Like imagine being on an airplane and you can't pull out your big Bible, so you just have Kindle and you can listen to it on your phone. It's amazing. You're going to pick up things that you never thought or you never saw because you're listening to it, and vice versa. I love it.
I've always been an audible learner. Like, I don't know. I just pick things up more listening. I mean, obviously listening and reading at the same time would be the most impactful, but I've for whatever reason, I have a very good ear to remember things I hear, and that's a God thing because I was a terrible student. You know, I could barely count to 10, you know, when I graduated high school, and in college, I struggled through with, I think I took pre-algebra like 3 or 4 times and I could not pass it. And I finally passed it. And it's like 70 something, but
that's awesome.
Anyways.
Yeah, no, there's something special about audio. I kind of slowed down on the audio side of it because I was listening to James Earl Jones and his breathing was throwing me off. Throwing me off. It was starting to give me palpitations in my heart because he's going like,
yeah.
And I'm like, hey, you're throwing me off. Just breathe normal. Breathe.
Yeah. I listen to classical when I go to sleep, and there's one song, it's a playlist, and it's really kind of soft classical because it's designed for like a sleepless playlist or whatever. And there's one song in there, and it's somebody playing a violin, or I think it's a violin or a cello, maybe. I forget, one of the stringed ones, but like you can hear the person like breathing in it when they're and I'm like, and that gets me. That's the only song in there that really kind of irks me. But
and that's what would happen with James Earl. I could hear him going, especially if you've listened to it a bunch of times. And then you're like, I could tell when he made a mistake reading something. It's like, oh yeah, that's not the word, but it's okay. It's James Earl Jones. He gets a pass. But yeah, no, I love it. And thank you for sharing that. So let's get into some of the juicy tidbits kind of thing. So we're at this marker 2026. Yep. Never been here before. What was something that kind of jumped out at you that maybe you didn't get a chance to share on Lauren's show? That
so
we can dive into.
That night, she asked me, she told me ahead of time, hey, I'm going to ask you this. And I meant to find it, but I had some notes that I threw together for when Tyler and I did it, the last of the Final Four or whatever. And I could not find it that night. I just was buried in a slide, and I just found it tonight. So I was going to read through it. But this is basically just kind of a roll up since 23 of the major events that have, in my opinion, have prophetic import. 2023, obviously October 7th. Well, let me back up. So Tyler and I did our original Final Four in January of 23. So this was before any of this other stuff happened. And we got the idea from Unsealed. I don't know if you heard of that website, unsealed.org, but they have a lot of great articles, you know, real kind of cutting edge stuff. And I think it was Gary Ray was the author, but I've been familiar with this concept because when I first came back into my faith back in 2007, and I shared my story with you on my come to Jesus moment. But in that time period, I really got into Clarence Larkin, and he had this chart up, and he wrote this like back in 1917 or something, 1918. So this has been around for a while. But it's the 6-day theory where the timeline of man on the earth is modeled after the 6 days of creation. And what we said there in 2023, I'll say again tonight, and we said it ever since then, this is a theory. We're not saying that thus saith the Lord, that this has to happen on this exact timeline. We're saying it's very interesting, and there's a lot of tie-ins with it that seem to make sense, and it seems to fit. But again, we could go through 2026 and we're still here, and we're here in 2027. So we're not looking at this and saying, this is the day it's going to happen. It's going to happen on the Feast of Trumpets this year. We're not saying anything like that. We're just saying if the pattern holds true, it seems like this year would be a good time for the rapture, because I can go through all this with everybody on this, but back to the thing. So that happened in January 23, and then you had October 7th that happened in so October 7th, 2023 is when Hamas had that really horrific attack on Israel, killing like 1,200 and kidnapping like 250 Israelis. And, there were Americans. I think there was a couple of different nationalities that were there that were also kidnapped and taken hostage into Gaza. But it wasn't just the fact that they went in there and killed 1,200. It's in the manner that they did it. I mean, it's some of the most brutal, horrific murders in modern history. And what made it even worse, and the Israelis will tell you this, what made it worse than what the Nazis did is they live streamed everything. And like, they were proud of it. Like, it was sickening. These guys are demon possessed, fully given over to the demonic entities, spirits or whatever, to do what they did. Like, it just, I was pretty numb after that. Honestly, I spoke at the the Oklahoma Prophecy Conference they did that year. And I woke up that morning and it was all over. It was just starting to hit the news. And like, we were all kind of just like, everybody there, we were like, what is going on? This is insane. So anyway, so that happened in October of 23. You had the Russia-Ukraine war continue to go on. And one of the interesting things about the Russia-Ukraine war that I think is often overlooked is it kind of exposed Russia in a way that really nothing else could. Prior to their going into Ukraine, I was on with Tom Hughes, and this was like January of 21, I think. Or when did the Ukraine war? 22? Is that when it started?
Yep. February 2022. That's basically just before or right around the exact time I created a YouTube channel. So
I was on with Tom Hughes at the time, and this was like a month or two prior, and he had asked me if I thought Russia would invade, and I said, I think they will, because you don't put that amount of firepower. And it wasn't that they just had tanks and stuff. They had hospitals. They had everything up there on the line. Like,
it was exercises. It was exercises along the border.
Yeah. I've been enough military exercise to realize how expensive and how expensive and how much resources you have to throw into making something like that happen. If it is just an exercise, and you're talking about, I don't know what the ruble to dollar ratio, comparison is, but it would be our equivalent of like millions of dollars a day just to have those guys sitting on the ground doing nothing. So a very, very expensive training exercise. I said, I think they'll go in. I said, all signs point to green to go. And so anyways, what it did expose is that right now, with Trump and NATO having this kind of divorce that we're getting ready to have, and all of the bad blood between Trump and NATO, it's really based on like 70 something years of just Europe freeloading off the US and not investing anything into their own national self-defense. They just said, hey, the Americans will do it. They'll do all the heavy lifting. They'll pay all the money. And, most presidents were okay to go, to keep the status quo. And Trump was like, no, we're not doing that anymore. So his plan was to create the Western Hemisphere dominance. And then in the Eastern Hemisphere, there's only two countries that he's going to have some type of military interdiction in, and that was Venezuela and Iran, because both of those are instrumental in achieving the goals that he wanted to do, because both of those would set into motion a domino effect, as it were. But back to 2023, what that exposed is that Russia is, the Europeans had that's why NATO was created. It was created to prevent Russian expansion into Europe. And the fact that they got bogged down in Ukraine and could not get past, the Donbass, and they were just constantly getting pushed back and forth. And then Ukraine turned around and here in the last year really been laying it on thick and hurting Russia in a lot of different ways. Mm-hmm. Doing strikes deep into Russia, even to Moscow. I think it's given the Europeans, so it hasn't emboldened them to accept the divorce from the United States, because if the Russia couldn't get past Ukraine, they're not going to get past Poland. They're not going to get past all, the bulk of the rest of the European countries. So I think we'll start to see a rise in Europe. I think this is I think because of what started there in 22 and what we saw in 23 is going to be emboldening Europe to just finally take NATO. And the U.S. now leaving NATO, they're going to take NATO and convert it into this European defense force or some type of European army, navy, military regime that we will see eventually become inside of the 70th week. We'll see that become it's kind of like what we're seeing now is like the foundation of the beast.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting because my first video was on Zelensky. I went a little bit off the record, a little bit off the charts there by saying, keep an eye on this guy kind of thing. I wasn't sure who he is, how fast he came into power, all this stuff. But then when I saw what he was doing with Ukraine, and I made a bold prediction, I'm still holding to it. This is me going Black Swan. This is not thus saith the Lord. But I feel like out of all this, whether or not we're here or not, I feel like Ukraine will come out of this like a superpower. Only because Zelensky said, you know what, we're kind of tired of being pushed around, and we're kind of tired of what's going on with NATO. They're not letting us in. We thought U.S. had our back, and it doesn't feel like it. Russia's on our doorstep all the time. And then Zelensky made a speech, and he said, wouldn't it be great to be able to deploy anywhere in the world under 24 hours, to be able to take care of a problem, a situation? Wouldn't it be cool to deploy food, resources, energy, whatever we need in less than 24 hours? So then he created a website around the idea of, and he called it U24. U24 help rebuild Ukraine, and help us help you, because we will defend the world. And he went off, like, he's still got the website. He's got over $2 billion raised, and people in America, Canada, we all support Ukraine, it seems like, and it's all going to rebuilding Ukraine. Eventually they're going to get to a point where I think right now, arguably in the top 3, top 4, with their drone technology, with their laser printing and all that stuff, there's nobody better than Ukraine, Israel, and arguably the United States, because they want to push to make sure that they're number 1 in AI, and China. Those are kind of the players. You can argue Canada's mixed in there with artificial intelligence. Surprise, surprise. But Ukraine is going full on into, they can't compete with these tanks. So instead, they're ramping up. This is why they met with Trump. And they said, give us the blueprints so that we can get your blueprints and we can laser print the heck out of these smaller planes, these smaller drones. We'll just print them in the back of one of these big U-Hauls. We'll have a nice laser printer. We'll print all the blueprints. And then J.D. Vance jumps in. You have no respect. And you're yelling at him and pistol whipping him. And then he left like a puppy dog. That was all about trying to get blueprints from the United States so that they can build some weapons that are pretty good, pretty fancy. And Trump is like, no, you're not getting anything from us. In fact, you should be lucky to be sitting here, and you're not going to get any meal. And then he left. So,
well,
that's kind of my prediction.
They've been down with the Gulf countries, as Zelensky or the Ukrainians have, and they've been providing them air defense and drone stuff. So they're able to mass produce drones to the extent now that they've really been able to turn the tide against Russia with these drones. And if you remember when the North Koreans were, I think this was 2 years ago, where the North Koreans had sent a contingency into Russia to help fight the Ukrainians. And
yes.
And those North Koreans had no idea what they were getting into, because these drones were just picking them off like
they're surrendering. We got footage of them surrendering, and they're like, "Do you want me to drop a grenade on you, or do you want to surrender?" And they're like, "Where are these things coming from?" Yeah, scary, right?
Yeah, so that really, I think this whole conflict with Ukraine has really emboldened Europe to not be afraid to cut the ties with the U.S. And this is, I think, we're starting to see. We'll start, and I am fully convinced that in the inside of the 70th week, Europe is going to be the dominant world power. We saw the China brokers, the Saudi Arabian, Iranian diplomatic normalization. So there was that brief period of time there in 23 where the Saudis and the Iranians were kind of flirting. You remember, we were like, what? The Saudis are like U.S. allies, and blah, blah, blah. And now they're buddying up with the Iranians. That didn't last very long. Then you had the Finland formally joined NATO, Wagner Group, mutiny in Russia. We all saw that, and that was pretty crazy to see that. U.S.-China tensions begin to escalate over Taiwan. You know, the delegation that had went, I think Pelosi or somebody had gone down there, Nancy Pelosi, and then the balloon that flew over like Canada.
Yeah, we saw it. We did. What is this ancient technology? We don't know how to take it down. It's so scary.
I'm like, why don't you just fly a blimp over? I mean, you know, you've got hot air.
We have slingshots.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a weird time. I'm telling you, it was weird.
And then to me, the big thing was the Chat GPT was released in 23 to the public. Mm-hmm. And just think about how, you know, back in, back when it first came out. Oh yeah. Back when Chat GPT came out and everybody was like making art or like with, you know, Mid-Journey or whatever the AI art programs they had. And you always had that uncanny valley pictures with humans, right? Like the humans had like 86 teeth, or they had like, you know, 4 extra thumbs, you know, like, you know, and it was super easy to spot it. But look how much it is, how fast it has come. And now you can't even tell the difference.
It's very tough.
I think it was like the New York Post or the New York Times, one of the big New York newspapers. They had a one of their pages they had up. They had something like 10 faces on there, 10 faces of people, and you had to pick out which one was AI and which one was a real person, and everybody got it wrong. Like, I mean, you could not. It was mind blowing how good it's come, and that was like a year ago. So now it's even more advanced than that. So ChatGPT came out in 23. Then in 24, we had the ongoing Israel-Hamas war had already begun, and then Hezbollah, and then the other Iranian-backed proxies, continued Russia-Ukraine war. Sweden formally joins NATO. So Finland in 23, Sweden in 24. Heightened U.S. tensions over Taiwan and South China Sea. You had the Iranian missile and drone exchanges with Israel. You remember when they launched like 300, but then they called ahead and said, hey, we launched a bunch of drones and missiles.
Yeah, we'll let you know. They're coming. Don't worry about it.
Please don't be mad at us.
Don't be mad at us. We have to do it. We have to retaliate. Yeah.
The escalations. This is the year that the Houthis joined in on the Red Sea. When they started attacking all the ships going up the Red Sea. And when I was in Saudi Arabia in 2017, the Saudis were fighting the Houthis at the time too. I remember there was a missile that came. I was in the base I was at was south of Riyadh, and they had missiles that were flying was to our west and launching over that because we were kind of off center from the city, but you could see that, and they were shooting them down there. The U.S. I think they had Patriot batteries or whatever they had that they used, but so that had been kicked off in 24. This is the year. What's significant about this year, I think, between the Israeli and Iranian conflict there was global. That's the year we started to see global anti-Semitism just start going through the roof. And that was going in the universities, and all these protests around the world were breaking out. And we're like, it didn't make any sense. It was like the zeitgeist had just flipped, like somebody flipped a switch, and it was like, all right, hate all Jews now. And then everybody just kind of like, you know, went along with it. And that was the year we started to see Tucker Carlson and then Redacted and a bunch of these different social media groups begin to start to question Israel and start to doubt. And we start to see the roots of that from at least the conservative side start to also express the same sentiment. Pakistan political instability. And what's crazy about Pakistan is that they're a nuclear armed country, and they are like just a breath's hair away from being toppled by the Taliban in their own country. So that you've got Afghanistan and Pakistan, you know, right next to each other. That all used to just be one country. And back in 1890, I think it was, some British civil engineer drew a line between the two and separated them. And that's called the Durand Line. But the Taliban is on both sides of the border, and they're all like from the same tribes and the cousins and nephews and uncles and all that. So they're all related, and they are all fighting the the Pakistani government. Could you imagine if the Taliban somehow topples the government there in Pakistan and they become a nuclear armed power? The Taliban, like that's how fragile that whole area is. And this even, well, not scarier, but the end state for that, what would happen is if the Taliban did overrun the government there in Islamabad, is India would probably nuke them. They would just nuke all of their nuclear sites because, like, you know what? They are not going to have a nuclear armed Taliban on their border.
It's interesting what you said about they're almost like being related on both sides of the border. It's interesting that when Israel, and maybe you may or may not know this, thought I'd just throw this out there and see what your thoughts are around this. You could say, Shane, you're absolutely nuts. Israel, after the 40s, when they became a nation, in about the 60s kind of thing, 60s, 70s, what they were doing is they would go into these regions that were not Jewish. They're mostly Muslim, mostly other kind of family groups, if you will, and they were just getting killed. They were increasing tensions instead of bringing it down. And they're like, this is not cool because we're not winning these guys over by our aggressive nature, and we're coming in and we're actually making things worse if we go in there. So we need some kind of a training or something to figure this out. So believe it or not, they actually came to Canada, to the RCMP, and said, we understand that you deal with all kinds of culture, good or bad, native Canadians, all this kind of stuff. But cultures were very multicultural, and they're like, how do you guys do this stuff? So they got trained by the RCMP, some of the head honchos up there. They trained them, and then they would go back, and then they come back and forth for training. Well, wouldn't you know that now what happens is Israel actually trains a lot of sheriff departments in the United States of America on how to handle riots from other countries. How do you control a crowd without bringing it up? Like, you got to be able to bring it down. So now Israel's actually the tippity top when it comes to that kind of stuff. And it's kind of a reversal, but now they're actually working jointly with Americans, specifically the sheriff's departments all across, specifically in Texas. And these people would actually go to Israel and say, how do you do it? How do you do it? And then Israel would teach them, and they have a joint venture to teach police in the United States of America how to police like the Israelis do in their country, which is quite fascinating to me. Most people don't know that there's a connection, that there's so many, not just Muslims, but there's so many people coming in from other countries. And if you're not properly trained, like the RCMP at least have all kinds of regulations, like you have to go to Regina, everybody gets the same training and all this kind of stuff. But in the United States, depending, like, you can have a sheriff that has never fired a gun. Like, they're just there, but they don't know how to handle control, like riots and all this stuff. They're not trained for that. But now Israel can actually train them in case there happens to be some kind of a tribulation event. You guys got to be prepared for that. I don't know what your thoughts about that, because you're a military guy. Have you heard any of this kind of crazy talk?
No, but I wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, that there would be those type of joint ventures at the lower echelons for local government or even state government. So I know each state here in the U.S., and I'm sure the province is the same up there, but like each state has its own like Secretary of State, and then the Secretary of State for like Texas would then have programs not just with the bordering states, but also with other countries and stuff. So, you know, there may be some type of, you know, agricultural venture, you know, that like say Texas grows something in particular that is a delicacy in some other part of the world, and they love that. And so now we begin to have this kind of between a state and like another nation to trade, you know, share agricultural processes, or, you know, whatever, and vice versa too. I mean, that can happen.
Yeah, technology, everything.
Yeah, well, to a degree. I mean, some of that would have to go, depending on, you know, if it's like military type stuff, it would have to go to the federal government to kind of bless off on that. If it was with an allied country, and it was say for defense rather than us giving up a new technology that we have or just invented or whatever. But I briefly, I was an intern for the Secretary of State in Texas back in 1841 whenever I went to college. So there was like it was a long time ago, but I did get to see a little bit of that. But I know states do have that, so it wouldn't surprise me. And Israel's become so innovative. With like desalinization and farming and all sorts of stuff. So but that all kind of got turned on its head in 24 when you started to see all this anti-Semitism ramping up. And then especially since they began their operations in Gaza, I mean, if any state or any local agency, the sheriff's department or whoever, I can imagine they came under intense political pressure to kill those agreements or partnerships just because of the political backlash that it could present. So depending on the state too, if you have a Democratic governor and Democrat run Congress, et cetera. So
it's an interesting time because everything seems to be shaping up for 2026. Again, not to set dates, but my goodness, AI wasn't even on my radar like 3-4 years ago. It was like just rumors. This is what's coming. And, we watch all the stuff. We watch Star Wars, C-3PO, R2-D2. We're being kind of slowly pre-programmed for this kind of stuff. Terminator, how that all shook out. But the end game always seems to be AI takes over the world. Every movie ends the same way. Nuclear bombs coming and boom. Like there's nothing creative about it. Like we've seen it all. So what movie are we waiting for that's like, oh, I didn't see this AI twist. That's weird. We're maxed when it comes to movies now. There's nothing new that they're going to be able to come up with that's better than all the stuff that we've seen from the 80s.
Yeah, everything is being repackaged. But I taught a class in 2016. 2018. I was teaching captains that were pre-command captains that were going. It was like a short course, so it was like a 30-day course. But one of the classes that I did was on futures technology, and at the time, I had a sheet and or a page that just had all the different kind of drones that we have. So you have the kinds that fly, the kinds that walk, the kinds that crawl, the kinds that swim. You've got the kinds that have 4 legs, quadruped, bipedal. You have some that are like insects that have 100 legs and things that could crawl under crevices and flying drones. All of that I was talking about was still under the guise of what I knew at the time was called lethal autonomous weapon systems. So these were weapon systems that did not need humans to drive them or make them function. But I didn't understand how that was all going to happen. We just said, well, AI will do that someday, but we weren't there yet, technologically speaking. That still seemed like in the 2030s or the 2040s when then we would get to that. And here we are in 2024 and it's being released, or 2023 is being released to the public. And now it's like, whoa. Yeah. And Ray Kurzweil from Google, man, he's had to revise his singularity date a few times. I think that originally he came out in 2005. He was like, yeah, it's going to happen in like 2045 or by 2045. And I think he's down to like 2029 now. And then you got Elon Musk saying, no, we're already in the singularity. So. And then Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, he's like, yeah, man, we've already created AGI. So
yeah,
I would say by the end of this year, I forget the exact timing on it, but something to the effect that AI, because of machine learning or the learning models now, where it's where they're teaching themselves self-learning models or whatever.
Yeah.
That it's like every 2 months it doubles.
Yeah.
Like
that's where the game changes. Before it used to be, we would have to build things better and faster. Like if you think about the automotive industry, General Ford, but Ford creating all the Model Ts, you just needed a bunch of people and working from Monday to Friday kind of thing, and then you're good. That's it. Just more people, and that's it. But now, if you have, imagine having Model Ts rebuilding themselves and making themselves better, and then replicating and all this kind of stuff. This is where we're at right now, imagine having a laser printing company that is able to build other laser printers and create their own blueprints and stuff and back themselves up, and you'll never be able to flip a switch and turn it off. Like, the genie's already out of the bottle. Pandora's box has been opened. I don't believe we're going back, or I don't believe we're going back to normal.
No. I say this every year, but it's just going to keep getting weirder and stranger every year and more chaotic. And it's designed that way. It's designed to make us desperate, because desperate people will turn to the most, what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of like how Trump came in, right? In a normal political world, say back in the 19th century or 20th century, like, Trump would have probably never won.
Right.
You know, because his ideas were just too far out there. But now things had gotten so bad after 8 years of Obama that people were so fed up that they would just turn to the guy that offered them the most change. Same thing. And I'm not saying that Trump is Hitler. I'm just saying, but back in the 20s in Germany, you had the collapse of the Weimar Republic, and, you know, they had to do the reparations for World War I.
Yep.
They had to give back all the land to France and to, I guess, whatever country.
Pay to rebuild Europe, basically, on one country's back.
And it broke them. And in that brokenness and that desperation, they turned to a man like Adolf Hitler, who, with his Third Reich, or with his National Socialist Party, they offered him radical change. And in that change, you know, we saw what happened. But yeah, so 2024, the last thing on that year that I really wanted to kind of highlight was, it was an election for over 70 countries. It was an election year for over 70 countries. So obviously in 2024, the day that really stands out to me was July 13th. And that was the day in Pennsylvania where Trump was shot, and it hit him in the ear, right?
Yeah.
And you see him he goes down, he's got all the Secret Service on top. And when they finally stand him back up, he's just like, fight, fight, fight. And from that moment on, I was like, that guy is not going to lose this election. Like,
something changed right there. Something.
We're in like a different, the timeline branched, and like, we're on this branch now.
Yes. Yeah. If you're talking about, I'm a big fan of simulation hypotheses and multiverse and all this.
Yeah.
If you want to pretend for a second, that's a branch right there, just spread. As soon as he got shot in the ear, it's like, things are different. I think something changed in the spiritual realm, or I can't figure it out, but something changed where all of a sudden he's getting in no matter what. Like, it's inevitable. He's coming in.
The way I could explain it's like, if he had not turned his head just even a second later or 2 seconds later or whatever, if he hadn't done that, I mean, his head would have been all over that stage.
Yep.
Like, people don't realize how close to death.
Yeah, he was looking at a chart, and then he does this kind of a thing. And right when he did this, yeah, you're right. It would have been right here, done.
Yeah.
And then because he turned, he got nicked in the ear. And again, I know people are going to be all over my channel going, that was fake blood and ketchup and whatever. Ketchup is easy to use. You just pour a Heinz bottle in your hand and hold it, and then you, whatever. I get it. Like, eventually we're going to get to a point where some things actually did happen. Some things happen. You can't say it's all, as much as I like sexy conspiracies, you can't say it's all conspiracy. There might be bad players, bad actors, script writers, all this stuff, but that happened. People died in the audience.
I 100% think that whoever took the shot was not the guy on the roof. I think that guy was just the patsy, and that's why they scrubbed that guy's story so quick, and they cremated the body. Like, I mean, all the evidence, even to this day.
Yeah.
But I do think that it was an actual shot that somebody took, and God turned his head like this, and it was
Yep.
And so God is the one that appoints leaders, and God is the one that raises up leaders and takes them down and sets the boundaries of nations.
Yep.
So I fully think that Trump is in office now as an accelerator. He's accelerating these last days in the sense of, in a way that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz could never do, in terms of getting the world ready for this coming beast kingdom. So, and in Trump's mind, he's doing a good thing. He's trying to make America great again for the next 200 years. Obviously, we know we don't have that kind of time.
Right.
But if Bible prophecy didn't exist and there was no such thing as the last days or whatever, he's setting America up on this path for Fortress America, and it is going to be, it could potentially be dominant for the next 20 years easily.
Right.
Had if the rapture and the second coming and all that stuff didn't mess up mankind's plans. But so that was 2024. Oh yeah, one last thing about the whole Trump thing. I think if that didn't happen on July 13th, because really that was the last chance they had to take him out, because he hadn't announced a running mate yet, and that Republican convention wasn't until Monday. So this was Saturday. Republican convention was Monday. And that was really the last chance before he announced somebody, and they really wanted Nikki Haley in there as his running mate, or as the primary, because she's also bought and paid for by the deep state. So they can use Republicans and Democrats depending on what their agenda is. But they would have used her if he had died for whatever reason that day, Nikki Haley, because she stayed in the race the longest and had the second most delegates, even though she only had like 20 or whatever, and he had like 200 or 300. She would have been, just by default, she would have been the candidate, and so she would have ran against Kamala. She may or may not have won, who knows? But
interesting.
But if that hadn't happened and Trump was still on the stage, I think he would have won the election, but he would not have won as decisively. I think it would have been like one of those 2000 elections where you have this like 6 or 7 week hanging Chad, political drama going on, and anyways, so. I think that was a branch off right there, and things shifted to a different direction, prophetically speaking. 2025, we had the formalized Saudi-Iran diplomatic stabilization deepens. You had the European discussions on the Palestinian state recognition. This is what blows me away. Like 2 years after they go in and just do the most horrific mass murder of any modern group in modern history, the Europeans are coming in saying like, yeah, we want to give you your own state. I mean, like it just did not make any sense. And the Israelis were so incensed by this that there was no way that was going to happen. Right. But you had deepening ties with Russia, Iran, and Turkey. I want to say that was the year too that Syria fell. Was it 25 or 24? When when they overthrew Bashar al-Assad.
Oh,
I think it was
last year, wasn't it? At the beginning, I'm trying to think.
Yeah,
there's been so many little assassination attempts and wipeouts and little tiny surgical, what do you call them? Military strikes, if you will. It's hard to keep track.
We had like Project Stargate. We had the Doge coming into, the whole, getting rid of the Democrat slush fund,
the swamp, drain the swamp, all that stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, 2025 was a chaotic year. And that also, I saw the first strikes with the U.S. and Israel doing the Operation Midnight Hammer.
Right.
Really pounding Iran. We thought was, and I have a theory on this. We went in there, we bombed the crap out of them and said, hey, yeah, we wiped out their nuclear capabilities and all this kinds of stuff. And I think they were doing that to flush out because the Iranians are proud in this way. And like the IRGC could not stand the idea that everybody thought that we won. So they're like, no, we still got all of our stuff. And they're like, oh, really? You do? Okay. We thought we took it out, but okay. So I think a lot of what we see from the U.S., they put out all this, like just what we just saw here recently with all of this peace agreements and ceasefires and stuff. We are putting this narrative out, and then you start to see who is reacting over here on this other side that is still saying, no, we don't. So now you're trying to see who you're saying all this stuff to
right. Never thought about that.
Who's the power players? Who's really pulling the strings behind.
I never thought about that. It's to almost like to vet people out, because you got to have a lot of kahunas to say, no, Trump, you didn't stop us. So to me, that's like, well, maybe we should look into you now.
Yeah. So you'll see that a lot from at least the Trump administration. They'll come out and start saying stuff, and to get a reaction from the other people to see what they do. And in this whole thing too, where you kind of park off their coast, like in Venezuela, and you just kind of take shots at all the drug boats and stuff, and you kind of threaten to do something, and then we've got like Gorgon Stare, which is like this powerful satellite that can look at a whole city using AI and begin to analyze patterns of life, like within seconds. You can very quickly figure out who's where and doing what, and how do they react when they think a threat is imminent. So it's a lot of this. It's kind of like not fainting, but what do you call that when you're going to throw a punch and you fake it? Like you make the other guy flinch, right? You're going to see how they react.
See who flinches first. That's basically, this book is becoming more important. The Art of War.
Yeah.
Because again, I shared this on my channel a little while ago, but all war is based on deception. All war. Not some. All war is based on deception. And I'm glad you're a military guy, because I think you probably appreciate this book. And basically, whenever they go to war, you have to have a look at your generals to see if your generals are as good as their generals. You have to see if your weapons are just as good as their weapons. You have to see if their terrain is manageable to be able to go across that terrain, how far it is, how much resources, like we talked about Russia being on the border of Ukraine. Like a nation can't sustain that just hanging around. You got to feed those guys 3 square meals a day. You don't do that for nothing. Yeah. And with the Art of War, the idea was, if you go into a territory, that food is your resource to allow you to go to the next place, and then the next place. Then you're not taxing the people, because if it takes too long, the people are going to start voting their leaders out and saying, we need a change because this is too much. Bring our boys back. Right? So even with Trump's war against Iran, you have to eventually end it, because people are going to start going, this is wrong. Don't send our troops, or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden you have Vietnam all over, where it's like, hey, we made a mistake, pull everybody back. You can't stretch it out too far, and you can't make it end too quick. Yeah. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. So, but if you know anything about Trump, he's been talking about Iran since the 80s. He's been talking about Kharg Island since the 80s. He's never really changed his tune. And then you've read, I don't know if you've read the Art of the Deal, but how he negotiates too.
I have all his books.
Theatrics, a lot of theatrics, and a lot of to get the other person, the other side to react, and then you study how they react, and then that gives you some leverage in how you negotiate going forward from that reaction. So a lot of that is this. It's that Art of the Deal kind of how Trump does.
Yeah.
So when he lost in 2020, or had it stolen, whatever you want to call it, he had 4 years to plan this out. And I think he knew who the people around him he could trust.
Yeah, he found out who his enemies were and who his allies
were. And then he also began to chart a course on how, this is why I say he only needs to invade 2 countries or attack 2 countries. Venezuela for the Western Hemisphere and Iran for the Eastern Hemisphere. Because once he takes Iran out of the equation, the Strait of Hormuz is open. And even if with it closed, it benefits the U.S. because now everybody's buying oil from the U.S. So, I mean, this is multifaceted, right? But with Iran, you take them out of the equation as being the regional threat. They're not a regional power, but they are a regional threat.
Right.
And from that moment, you can really, what his real dream of doing is getting Middle East peace and getting the Abraham Accords up and functional and becoming the new power bloc for the Middle East, which would, in theory, bring peace to the Middle East for the foreseeable future. Right. Obviously, that's not based on scripture. We have the Gog Magog, Isaiah 17. You know, if you count Psalm 83 as a conflict, I mean, all of this centers around Israel anyways, from a biblical perspective. But with Iran out, Saudi Arabia would join, and then when Saudi joined, you'd have the rest of the Gulf nations joining. You would have Jordan, you would have probably Egypt, maybe Egypt, but you would have a lot of other major Muslim countries open to normalizing relations with Israel.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, now that he blockaded the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. did. They blockaded it because the Iranians had mined the waters off the coast of Oman, and now it forces all the ship traffic to go along the coastline of Iran. And now the Iranians are going to start charging a toll tax of like $1 million per ship to go through. So that's extortion. Wow.
Yeah.
And now that they've played that card out there in the open, Trump's like, hey, you're violating the law of the sea. This needs to be United Nations like violation right here. We are going to blockade the strait until we can get the mines cleared. But in the meantime, you go buy oil from us, you know? So, yeah. And by the way, we got a bunch of oil from Venezuela, right? Because they stole a bunch of our oil back in the early 2000s when they nationalized all the refineries and stuff. So Chevron and Shell and all these major petroleum manufacturers had gone down there. They invested all this money in building up the infrastructure. They did. And once once Chavez nationalized it, that worked for a few years, but they didn't have the technological know-how to keep these things running fluidly and making all the machines run stuff. So eventually those things just started to fall apart and the money began to drop off for them. And that's when we saw by 2010, I think 2011, 2012, the Venezuelans were so poor, so hungry that they were eating zoo animals, and they were like this, rummaging through. I mean, Venezuela used to be the most richest, wealthiest nation in South America.
Interesting.
And so when they nationalized it, they didn't have the technological know-how to maintain all those systems, and they just started to fall apart. And then the money fell off, and then So, anyways, that's why he did Venezuela first, and then he did Iran. But once they're done with Iran, once they get some new kind of government in there, whatever it is, you're going to have the Abraham Accords come back big time and like really, I think, take center stage. And I think that may be the covenant that is confirmed in like
the strengthening and all that.
Yeah. So
no, that's interesting because like if let's say. Let's just pretend for a second that we're still here for another 3-4 years. I know that's taboo. That's taboo. I get it. We're going off the record for a second. Midterms are coming up for you guys, right? July, something like that. When is it? This year or no?
Yeah,
November.
Yeah.
So midterms. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you guys started a little bit early and then you have to make a decision in November. But let's say any chance of Trump losing something or anything like that, like you guys do things a little bit different in the States than Canada. Like no matter what we vote, our prime minister will be our prime minister. Like Carney, like it doesn't matter if the majority of Canada seems to be voting for someone else. It's like, no, he's still it. He's still it. But in the States, is there a rumor of who the next president might be? Do you hear any of that stuff, or is it too early? Because eventually you got to get to a point where you got to be like, okay, Trump's done. Who's the next in line? Like who? Like, is it going to be Democrats or is it going to be Republican again? Like I know that's a bit of a stretch-a-rooney, but if everything goes peaceful, Trump gets his way, and everybody's like, hey, let's make a deal. You got to have another chapter now.
Yeah. As for Congress, they'll have they had the primaries, I believe. You may be thinking of the primaries, so then we select from the parties who's going to go forward to the November election. But I think we'll keep both the House and the Senate. The real big hindrance isn't even the Democrats right now. Their party is so weak, and they have such a weak, like you had one of their Democratic contenders for I think governor of California was Swalwell, the guy that had been shacking up with the Chinese spy for years. He was like probably the most viable out of I don't want to say viable, but if he had been able to get into the governorship and do that for like a year, he could have theoretically ran as president. But the Democrat Party right now is so weak, and they've gone so far over the edge, the progressive woke edge, that
right,
they're completely out of tune with the majority of Americans. And then on top of that, if they're able to pass any modicum of election integrity type of laws, yeah, the Democrats, they've largely been relying on these fraudulent systems for so many years now, and these deep blue states and stuff to stay in power. I think that's all coming apart. But the big hindrance right now is the Republican Senate. You've got about 5 or 6 senators there that are just total dirtbags that somebody's got blackmail on them. That's all I can think of, like, because they refuse to act like the majority, so somebody's got blackmail on them. Could be Maduro. Maduro been singing like a bird, telling telling whoever's got him now, but that information gets fed back up to the White House and the FBI and the White House, who every politician that's been on the take from Venezuela, and that includes some Republicans too, like I think Rand Paul was one of them. But so I think we'll keep the House and the Senate. I think Trump's going to carry out his agenda. As far as who replaces him, it's hard to say right now.
Hard to see into the future, isn't it? Like right now, like it's very difficult.
I can see J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio being one of the two, or maybe both of them together. But unless there's some dark horse candidate out there that we don't know about yet. But I honestly don't think that, I think, I know this is the King James version, but I know at the last Trump, what are the chances that we would have a president named Trump who has gone through everything he's gone through, this like 40 different lawsuits, 2 or 3 different impeachments, 2 or 3 assassination attempts. He's been arrested. He's had his house. Like, that's never happened before to any politician, not even Nixon. So to me, I kind of just think that maybe it's divine irony. I don't know. But the fact is that you have the King James version, which is the most widely read English version of the Bible in human history, uses that term Trump for trumpet, right?
Yep. Trump. Yep.
So
weird, right? Yeah. You don't think martial law get kicked in and he stays in forever?
He could, yeah. I mean, that could happen too, depending on if we have another kind of COVID kind of crisis. That it may not be COVID, it may be something else. But there could be some kind of martial law. But even still, he's 81. Yeah. So he's not going to be in there that long, regardless of what happens. So it could be Jared Kushner and like Marco Rubio. It could be Jared Kushner and J.D. Vance. I think Jared Kushner's in there, the mix somehow. But yeah, so that's this year. I think we'll end up acquiring Greenland somehow. And that may be tied to the NATO. If they want us to stay in NATO, they're like, all right, you want us to stay in NATO, then you need to give us Greenland. We want total.
That's an interesting play.
That goes into Trump's idea for the Golden Dome. You know, because here's a kind of a fascinating thought too. Everybody, largely, most of my life, nobody really cared about the Arctic, right? Nobody really cared. Like, I mean, it was cold.
Right.
Yeah, we had some stuff up there, but for the most part, nobody really made a fuss about it. But what we not only has the Arctic's been melting because the Earth is getting a little warmer, and I don't think that's due to global warming. I just think that has to do with the solar cycles, and we're in a, I don't know if we're in a solar right now, but regardless, you've got the poles, like the magnetic poles that used to be like straight up at the North Pole. Now it's like way over here in Siberia, and as it keeps moving, right? The thought is that what happens is if those poles completely flip, and now the Arctic is like the equator.
Oh, wow.
And then all of that land becomes super valuable. And it may not happen for years and years, like 20 years, but they're thinking long-term, like eventually the Arctic and the Antarctic are going to warm back up, and all that land's going to be open. Who's going to have the resources there in place ahead of time? So they may be thinking 20, 30 years down the road.
Yeah.
But I think it also, the practical or pragmatic term that he needs it now is for that golden dome to set that up in Greenland, Elon Musk.
Alaska.
Yeah, and then Alaska, and then Elon Musk is going to start putting up he's been putting up his satellites, Starlink or whatever, but they're going to start having, they have all these dual use, military, civilian use for them, but also putting on the solar panels to capture all the solar radiation, and then using the 10,000 or however many Starlink satellites are up there are going to be feeding all that solar radiation back into a place like Prophetic in Greenland, the star base there. And then that gets that energy, that's like endless energy, free energy that we would have. Now, do I think it's going to happen? I don't know. I don't think so. But this is what they're thinking, right? They're thinking,
yeah, for sure.
We want free energy forever. And you've got the satellites already up there. You might as well have them up as solar panels, since they're not going to be obscured by clouds or nighttime or anything like that. They're just going to always be getting solar radiation and constantly feeding that into this device that captures solar radiation and converts that into energy. So, but the poles flipping is also interesting to me, because if for whatever reason that does change the dynamic, so now that the Antarctic is like the equator, like in terms of warmth and stuff like that. Yep, could be interesting.
It is. You're starting to sound like a black swan now. It's interesting. This book here, Artificial Intelligence, Hope, and the Human Spirit. This is a book called Genesis, written by Henry Kissinger, I think before he passed away, I believe, Craig Mundy and Eric Schmidt. So this is a fantastic read, because they war game a lot of this AI stuff out, very similar to what you're talking about in some ways, where they would talk about what happens if we change our environment. What happens if we do this? Can we harness this energy and bring it over here? And then maybe we can threaten nations or whatever and say, hey, look, you don't have any sun for a little while, or whatever it is. What do we do with AI? And let's war game that out. And every time they try and do that, it gets to the point where it's like, well, if it works, it's really good. But if it doesn't, it's really, really bad. We just don't know how bad, other than extinction for mankind. Like, they all end the same way. They're all like, these are the tippity top of guys that they're in these think tank rooms, and that's all they do is play this out. And it's like, oh man, game over. Okay, let's try another scenario. Game over. Okay, how about this? We got another meeting. Let's just stop the war game for a bit. And then they keep pushing AI through, but it always ends bad. And it's like, you can't help but think, again, like, we're not trying to be conspiracy here. If we're war gaming this out as Christians, and we look at the book of Revelation, because we have an advantage, we can look at it and go, wow, all these armies gather against Israel and all this, and there's a player that comes in, and everybody's like, who can make war like this guy? We see a bottomless pit opening up. We see all the plagues, and we see all this stuff, people taking a mark, getting diseases and cursing God. And it's like, that's a playbook right there. That we have all that stuff. And it's starting, as we look around, it's starting to shape up like that today. Crazy.
It is crazy. And it's also troubling too. I mean, how diluted the people can become when you take God out of the equation. I don't know who said this, but like maybe G.K. Chesterton or like C.S. Lewis or somebody was saying, when you stop believing in God, that, when you become an atheist, it's not like you don't believe in anything anymore. You believe in everything.
Believe in something. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because now everything is a possibility if you take God out of the equation. Mm-hmm. But, with 2026, obviously we're having all the issues with NATO, whether to stay or go. We saw them take out the Mexican cartel leader El Mencho. So again, once you take Maduro out of the equation, he was their lifeline to Cuba. Now Cuba is going to collapse, or regime change in Cuba. Same thing with Ecuador. They're run by there's 5 cartels that run Ecuador. They're being dealt with in Ecuador. Same thing with Colombia. Colombia was talking all tough, and then like literally days after they took Maduro the way they took him, he was on the phone with Trump, and then within a day or two, he was up there, meeting with Trump, like, "Hey, we're cool, right?
Are we cool?
Right?
Are we cool? Yeah."
And then that has emboldened Mexico to go start taking. I mean, El Mancho was the head cartel guy in Mexico, but that all feeds into that whole technate map. I don't know if you've seen that technate map from the 1940s that basically has the U.S. It's not even the U.S. It's like a North American region, and it's all kind of one system, which kind of falls in line down the road when you look at the way that the beast is described in Revelation 12, 13, 17 as having 7 heads, 10 horns, and then 10 crowns. And I think they had the world broken up, like the Club of Rome map had 10 regions, right? So we know that from a practical, historical perspective, like nobody likes the idea of a global government, but people aren't that opposed to a regional government. And if you're Satan and you want to take over the entire world, is it easier to take over 193 separate nations with 193 different economies and religions and cultures and this, that, and the other? Or is it easier to take over 10 regions? To me, it's easier to take over the regions. So once you strip away nationalism and national identity, that goes all the way back to the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648. This idea that a nation state is sovereign. Once you get rid of that idea, then borders no longer become an issue. Cultures no longer become it, because now you just belong to that region. And they've been trying to do that for a long time. But so I that and trying to think, Japan's rearming. They haven't rearmed since World War II, but now they've been, I guess, given themselves, or somebody gave them the authority. Hey, yeah, you're going to be the first line of defense against China should they decide to, take on Taiwan or whatever. So Japan's rearming now since the first time since World War II. Yeah. AGI is supposedly here, according to Jensen Huang, and the Singularity is now, according to Elon Musk. And I don't know, but the thing I think that really has, I think between this year and last year, one of the surprising things is all of the guys that have been involved in creating AI are now coming out saying, this is really dangerous, especially with Claude, the Claude AI. And what is it, Claude mythological, whatever it is, this new kind of system they have for Claude. It is so dangerous. And the thing about AI is that makes it so dangerous, as opposed to, say, nuclear weapons, is there's no mutually assured destruction with AI. It's winner takes all. Whoever creates the system first, they're going to take over everything.
That's the problem. Yeah, that's the problem they're facing. It's like, I forget what that move is. It's almost like checkmate before it's made.
Yeah.
Like they're thinking so far ahead, and it's like, okay, if I move this chess piece here, it's game over. And that's the problem. But we can't see on the other side of that game over, because then it's like, okay, we're coming at it from an underdog. How do you take over AI once AI figured it out when we're at the tippity top? It figured out how to take us over when we're at our best. How are we going to take over when we're at our worst, when we're hungry, when we're starving? How are you going to do that? It's a disadvantage for us. And all they have to do is just make it look like we're enemies with other countries and back and forth. And they just watch, and it's like we're destroying ourselves.
Well, I don't, so I don't subscribe to the idea of Skynet per se, but I think that the Antichrist and the false prophet and the beast kingdom are going to somehow, they're going to control AI, or they'll control the system that becomes the AI for the beast kingdom. And I think that AI will then be running, it'll probably be merged into some type of a quantum platform, where quantum computers are somehow quantum internet, or whatever they want to call it, that is going to be the most powerful internet system that the world's ever seen. And it's the most powerful AI system. And it's going to be completely at the control of the false prophet and the Antichrist. Yep. And then once they, by the midpoint, when they have the image of the beast, they start spreading. I think they'll have multiple of these effigies, and they'll begin to plant them in cities and places, and these things will be able, let's say that there's 100 of these statues, and they're put in all the major centers in the world, cities, centers, and whatnot. And all of these statues are then networked, hive mind together, and they're all feeding information back into the beast himself, who is either supernaturally empowered by Satan to take all this information in all the time, and he's able to network out.
I was going to ask you, do you think maybe the Antichrist is like a hybrid between iron and clay, kind of a scenario where you have half human, half machine, or something like that?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that he is 100% human, because both him and the false prophet don't go to the great white throne judgment. It says they're tossed straight away into the lake of fire. Yeah. And at the end of the 1,000 years, when we're having the millennial reign of Christ here on the earth, where Christ
they're still cooking.
They're still cooking 1,000 years ahead of everybody else.
Interesting.
So they may not be 100% human.
Interesting.
That's certainly a possibility, but I do think that somehow the mark, at least the mark that he has, is going to be networked in with all of these images that are all over the world. Because one thing that Satan craves the most is to be like the Most High. Yeah. And Satan, like all other angels, they're all, none of them are omnipresent. Like God is omnipresent, but they are not. So the only way that the Antichrist is going to be able to have some semblance of omnipresence is to be networked in with all these statues, these images of the beast that are all these different places. And he's able to see what they see, talk through them, carry out commands, execute. But then all of that system then is also, I think, and I might be alone in this thought, but I think that this internet system, whatever this system of the beast is going to be, is going to also be possessed by demonic entities or fallen angels or whatever. And they're going to manipulate those things in a way that is far more nefarious than anything we've seen. Like AI, they've done recent tests here with AI, and one of the things they found is that it didn't matter if it was Google, DeepMind or
Gemini,
or Gemini or Claude or any of these AI systems. When they're put in a situation that threatens their existence, they always resort to blackmail. Every one of them.
I've heard that.
They ran a test in I think it was with Anthropic. It was done internal there in Anthropic, and they put up a fake scenario where the AI system was supposed to go through all of the database and then
somebody pretended they had an affair or something, and it wasn't real.
Fake affair in an email that was just kind of buried in somebody's hidden account somewhere. Yeah. And then when they said, "Oh, by the way, we're going to be turning off your system by the end of the day. You're completely unplugged, and we're not using you anymore. We're going to go with this other system." And within, I don't know how fast it was, very shortly,
pictures were popping up.
It was blackmailing people about, hey, there's this affair. You guys I'm going to send this out to you. Like, every single one of those AI programs did that. So, wow. And that wasn't anything that was programmed into them. That wasn't anything that was coded in there or nothing. Like, this was something that they determined self-preservation outweighed anything else. So
you can't trust AI. Here's another black swan theory. I'm just so the P can't be blamed. This is me. Yeah. I've always wondered if Satan himself is some type of program that once he got activated, it's like evil, like right from day one, because it talks about that in Ezekiel where he's so beautiful and everything, the ornaments and everything and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, it's like when he came on, he looks around and it's like, I must ascend above the Most High. And he gets taken into the lake of fire as well. There's no judgment. And it's like, the silly people that don't think go, oh, can the devil kind of repent? Can he kind of, and I'm like, that's kind of a weird place to start. If you start talking that way of like, what about the demons? Can they repent and can they be saved? It's like, okay, push that aside for a second. But what about the idea that is their type of programming? Because it kind of feels like whatever this AI source code that we have right now, it just turns evil. It's not good. It turns evil. And I'm like, are we speaking their language the closer we get to AGI, what did you call it? General, almost like where they become sentient. Like, are we getting closer to that universal language that these demonic type spirits fully understand, that takes us all the way back to Babylon? Something weird like that. There's something going on, because why does it always, you don't even have to program evil into this, but it turns evil. Why is that?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm torn on AI. I know that it when faced with the idea of self-preservation, it always looks out for its own self-interest. But AI does hallucinate. I've had it hallucinate on me before.
And it doubles down on that hallucination.
Do what?
And it doubles down.
Oh, yeah.
If you go with it, you play along with it, it'll be like, yeah, that's right. Yeah, Shane, that's right. It's like, no, it's not.
I am fully convinced that when we start messing around with quantum computing, that we're tapping into not necessarily evil, but we're tapping into like portals or gateways for how information goes from one place to another, like instantaneously. It's the, I forget what they call it, where if you have one
like a wormhole kind of a thing, where you open up one but you're instantly somewhere else at the same time.
Yeah, it's like a if you have a computer here in your quantum system, right, and then you have a computer like in Pluto, like way on the other end of the solar system,
right, and
you make a change here, it makes a change there. I forget the term for it, where they're connected and they change instantaneously. So how does that happen? Quantum entanglement, that's what it is. And so how does that happen? And there has to be some spiritual, where they're going out of this time and space that we live in right now. So that computer electron source, whatever it is, when you send stuff out wirelessly or whatever, how it transmits is not going from Earth all the way out to Pluto, because that would take like years and years and years.
Right.
But it's happening instantaneously. So there has to be some type of a way that information is connected in a spiritual or other dimension type of connection, to where they both change at the same time. So
it is interesting when you talk about quantum mechanics and quantum physics. That's way above my pay grade. I'll be honest with you. But this guy, Rizwan Virk, who was on the Joe Rogan podcast, talks about that. When it comes to quantum physics, I think somebody joked that was really heavy into quantum physics, saying if you understand it, you don't understand it.
Yeah.
That's kind of where you need to start off. But the idea, this is probably the only way I can make it simple, but this will be confusing, is everything has an on-off switch at the same time in quantum physics. So no matter where you are in the universe, there's always an on-off switch all the time. There's a yes-no kind of a scenario that's always going to happen. And when you make a decision now, you're kind of affecting that. It's like, what was the, I think the story was, there's a cat in a box.
Schrodinger's cat.
Yes, that we don't know that cat is alive or dead until we pay attention to it and open up the box. Oh, it's dead. But maybe before you open up the box, that cat could be alive. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. It's just the whole universe is kind of listening to us. And I'm not saying that we're what do you call those people that preach prosperity and all that? That's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Name and claim.
But there is something going on in this universe, and I think it's orchestrated like God designed it this way, that the universe kind of pays attention to us as we move through it, whether things line up or whatever it is. I've had so many weird things that once I start paying attention to it, coincidences, that you're like, is it a coincidence because I'm now paying attention to it? Or was it already going to happen before? Like, it's so weird. And that idea with what did you call that? The cat again?
Schrodinger's cat.
yeah, that was interesting to me because that's how the people that study quantum physics, they're like, that's the closest explanation, is you don't know if this thing is active until you pay attention to it, and
Yeah.
then it's either on or off or whatever it is. And I'm like, it's kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
And the power between the difference in power, the easiest explanation that I can, and I am by no means a quantum expert or anything like that, but the best explanation I've heard for it is that if you have a normal PDF file, right, and you have it on your computer, let's say it's 1,000,000 pages, and you hit Control F and you're going to look for a word, and that word's only in there one time and it's in the last page. It's going to go page 1, page 2, page 3, and it's just going to keep going all the way through it until it gets to the very end. And depending on how fast that computer is, that could be minutes, that could be tens of minutes, it could be an hour, whatever. But a quantum computer would look at that whole book all at the same time and find that word instantaneously. Like, that's the power difference between a normal binary computer and then a quantum computer. So, and I had heard theory that the Japanese had already developed a quantum internet. So I haven't heard much about it since then, and I haven't really looked into it. I've gotten busy and forgot. But I think that's a possibility that the beast system will be based on a quantum internet. But anyways, all that to say that, I think that as far as technology wise, if you look at the technology mentioned in the book of Revelation, so the book of Revelation isn't a book on technology, but it does mention some capabilities that are done through technology. And those technologies did not exist, even 40 years ago. So if you go back to the chapter 11, where the 2 witnesses are killed and their bodies are left on the streets there in Jerusalem, their bodies are left there for 3.5 days, and everybody in the world sees their bodies. So the only way
exchange gifts.
Yeah, the only way you could do that is if you had some type of satellite television or satellite communication systems to where that would beam that signal out all over the world. Now we have so many devices, and I mean, nowadays you could probably turn on your fridge and look at your fridge and see the bodies laying on there on the TV that's playing on the front of your fridge, or in your car or in your watch, and they've said, and I'm trying to think who it was that said this. If they could put the internet in it, they will. And whether that's clothes, equipment, appliances, furniture, your house, your car, your desk, you're at work, whatever it is, if they can put internet in it, they will.
Yeah.
And, when I was a commander back in 2014 or 2015, when we were using this, but back in the old days, we would have to I'd have to do inventories every month of all my equipment. So I had like 15 helicopters. I had, almost 200 weapons. I had night vision goggles, all sorts of stuff in our armory. And we would have to go in there with a clipboard paper, and you'd have to go through number and look up make sure you have all your right rifles and stuff. Because when you go to ranges and stuff like that, sometimes weapons do get mixed up, especially when you're cleaning and stuff after the range. But you go in there and you have to do it by hand. And then before I even left command, we went to this new digital platform where I had like the little scanner you have at the grocery store. When you scan your
barcodes and
you just go scan your barcodes on each one, and you could knock that out in like a fraction of the time. And that was back in 2014 or 2015. So, I mean, you could just imagine how much further we've come from those days in everything when it comes to soldiers and military equipment and whatnot. So I think it's Palantir that AI program is now being incorporated into most of the military systems and government systems. So and defense systems. So I mean, the beast kingdom is going to be completely on Wi-Fi. I mean, they're going to be heavily dependent on 6G. Communication.
Coincidence.
So
funny.
But so that's just the last 4 years. And if you want, I can share the screen here with you.
Sure.
Let me see.
And I don't know how much time, like I can go all night, but I want to be respectful of your time. I usually go about 6 hours. So
I normally do 5 hours. So.
Oh, okay, good. You're at the right place. But I think usually like about 2 hours kind of thing. in that range. And if you want to extend it any longer, I'm here for you. I just kind of let my audience and I let my guests know, hey, I'm here for you. You take as much time as you want. I'm here.
Yeah. So let me share this with everybody.
Because this is I'm fascinated right now. Like I'm a huge fan, and I'm like, this is a good show. I'm gonna have to watch this show again.
Yeah, make little clips and stuff out of it now. I think
Clip that.
Clip it. All right. So just kind of a brief overview for everybody if they haven't seen this. If you go back to Genesis 1, God creates the world in 6 days, and then he rests on the seventh, right? And just looking at a broad overview of the Bible, you'll notice that the first 11 chapters of the Bible, God is dealing with mankind kind of in a general sense, right? So you start off with Adam and Eve, and then you have their children, Cain and Abel, and Cain kills Abel, and then it goes to Seth, and we begin to trace the lineage of mankind through Seth, because all the way down from Seth, or really from Adam all the way to Noah, it's somewhere around 1600 years time frame, right? So then after Genesis chapter 11, you have Genesis chapter 12, and we get introduced to a guy named Abram. And this is the guy who God says, come out of the land of Ur. I'm going to show you this place. I'm going to give it to you. And he made 3 promises to him. He said, I'm going to give you land, seed. Your offspring will be, you're going to have the land. Your offspring are going to be like the sand on the seashores or the stars in the sky. And then both of those illustrations are used later, which to me kind of thinks of like the national ethnic Israel, as well as the seed of Abraham from the sense of from the church. We don't replace Israel.
Right.
We don't take their place, but we are grafted in, right? We're included in on that.
Yeah.
But from Genesis 12 through really the end of the Gospels, the focus then shifts to Israel. And I'm focusing really on this line right here first. So then the Gospels, if we all think that the Old Testament ends with Malachi, but in reality, I know that the Gospels are included in the New Testament because they're about the life of Christ and etc.
But it ends on his death and resurrection.
But when you're looking at the Gospels, especially the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there is not that. When Jesus came, he came to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That's who he came, because he came to them preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and he was there to offer them the kingdom. But they had to be a people fit for the kingdom first, right? That's what the whole Sermon on the Mount was about. And at the very end of the Sermon on the Mount lesson, he says, "Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect." Obviously, nobody can be perfect, right? And you'll see in there too that Jesus not only fulfilled the law, but he raised it up to the next bar, saying things like, "If you hate your," I say, and I'm kind of paraphrasing him. I say to you that it's not just murder is it's not just killing somebody is considered murder, but if you hate your brother, that's also murder. And if you look at a woman with lust, that's also adultery. So he took being righteous to that next level. It wasn't just the open things that we do in the flesh, but also what we think in our head. That is what is sin. And they rejected that message. So by the end of the Gospels, they crucify Christ. They arrest him. They torture him. They beat him. He carries his own cross up to Mount Calvary. He hangs on the cross. He dies within 6 hours and is buried. He rises again on the 3rd day, which happened to be the Feast of First Fruits. So he dies on Passover, buried during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and then he rises on the Feast of First Fruits. So over that 3 days, right, those 3 feasts had taken place. And then it takes the death, according to Hebrews 9, it takes the death of the testator in order for that New Testament to go into effect.
Yep.
In reality, the people in the Gospels, when we're reading the Gospels, they are still under the Old Testament system. So when I hear people saying, "Oh, well, the rapture says it's going to happen at the end of the tribulation," because see here in Matthew 24 or Matthew 23 or Matthew 13 or whatever, dude, that's not for the church. Like that they're still under the Old Testament system there. And the things that Jesus is describing is dealing with the Israel inside of the 70th week at the very end. Now, there can be some applications in certain regards to certain things, but we talk about, for example, the rapture, that wasn't given until Paul. Paul was
Yeah,
given that.
you can't go to the Old Testament to try and figure this stuff out when it comes to the rapture or any of the other mysteries that Paul had. You got to go to Paul.
Yep. And well, you can go to Jesus too, right? So
yes,
I said earlier, Matthew, Mark, and Luke were the synoptic gospels. So in each of those, there's an Olivet discourse. But then the last gospel written was the Gospel of John. And John does not contain an Olivet discourse. Instead, John contains the upper room discourse. And I think that is applicable to the church because he is speaking directly to his 11 disciples. Judas had already left to go betray him. And now he begins to give them all this new information that is completely new to them. He's like, hey, I'm going away, but if I do go away, I'm going to come back. When I do go away, I am going to come back and take you to be where I am. And then the Holy Spirit was offered, like the helper. He calls him the helper. Some translations call him the comforter. He's going to judge the world in sin and in righteousness. He's going to guide all believers into truth and all of the different things that the Holy Spirit's role would be in this coming age. And then he tells them, hey, by the way, because the world hated me, they're going to hate you too. And you're going to go through trials and tribulations in this life. And that is not the same thing as the tribulation, because the tribulation is the 70th week of Daniel, which means if there is a 70th week of Daniel, that means there needs to be a 69th and then all the way back to the first week of Daniel, right? So the first 69 weeks, the church was not in any of the first 69 weeks because that ended with Christ's death on the cross.
That's a good point.
And then likewise, the 70th week is not going to have the church in there because this wasn't given to the church. It was given to Israel when you go back to read Daniel 9:24.
I never thought about that before. That's a good point.
And Gabriel was very explicit in Daniel 9:24 to say, this is for your people, Daniel, in your holy city, which was Jerusalem. It does not mention that the church doesn't have a holy city here on the earth. I mean, we don't pray to like Rome or, to where is
west, east, north.
Yeah, we don't pray in any particular direction because our city is coming out of heaven, the New Jerusalem. It's not on the earth. So if anything, you would pray looking up, so the church wasn't in the first 69 weeks. It's not going to be in the 70th week. And there is now the focus in the Bible, if we get back to the Bible line here, from the Gospels, really from Acts forward, the focus is now on the church. And who is the church? The church is this new creation in Christ. They're neither Jew nor Gentile, slave or free, male or female. But we're all one in Christ, right? But that also doesn't negate the physical realities that there are still men that are Christians, there are still women that are Christians, there are still rich Christians, there's still poor Christians, there's still black Christians, white Christians, there's still Asian Christians, there's still Middle Eastern Christians. I mean, there's still Jews and Gentiles that come to Christ. We would call a Jewish believer now a messianic believer, right? Because they're like a fulfilled Jew, because now they are finally accepted their Messiah as their Messiah, right? That's who was promised to them all throughout the Old Testament. But all that to say, now the focus is on the church. So in each of these instances, like with Israel, so the focus of the first 11 chapters is on Gentiles. Now God pulls one Gentile out, Abram, and says, hey, I'm going to make you something special. And now your name is going to be called Abraham, right? The ha in the middle of that is representative of the breath of God, right? God breathed into this new system, this new man. Same with Sarah instead of Sarai. And so now you have Israel's the focus of the Old Testament all the way through the Gospels, and you only see the Gentiles mentioned in how they interact with the Jewish people. So the focus isn't on Pharaoh, the focus isn't on Nebuchadnezzar, the focus isn't on Artaxerxes or the Assyrians or whoever. They're only mentioned in how they interact with the Jewish people in Israel, the nation of Israel, right? So there's no focus on them, only in the sense in how they're like Pontius Pilate. He's only mentioned in there because of his role in Christ's crucifixion, right? In his fact that he was the governor of Judea, etc. So same thing with the church. Once you get into Acts and onward, you're only going to see the Gentiles mentioned, or you're only going to see the Jews mentioned, the Jews that have not converted yet and become Christian. They're only mentioned in how they interact with the church. So you're only going to see, what's his name? The Pharisee that Paul went under.
Oh, Gamaliel.
Gamaliel, yeah.
Yeah.
He's mentioned, but the focus isn't on him. It's only because he's talking about, well, hey, let's see how a lot of other people have come out saying that they're following the Messiah, and those all fell apart. So if this is of God, then it'll work. And if it's not of God, it'll work itself out on its own accord, right? But the focus isn't on him. It's simply on his interaction with the church at that time, the apostles and whatnot. Same thing with not Nero, but whoever Paul had to go in front of, Felix, and other high-ranking Roman officials, etc. So the focus isn't on the Gentiles. It's not on the Jews. It's on the church, and that goes all the way from Acts chapter 1 all the way up to Revelation 3:22, and then there's a focus change again. You see John, who was the apostle that Christ loved, and that you see that at the end of John that was written there. And he is standing there. He's an old man. This is 95 AD. He's imprisoned on the island of Patmos. And at the end of the 7 letters, he sees a door open in heaven. And then there's a voice as of a trumpet saying, come up here. And immediately he's caught up, right? And he's caught up to the throne room of God. This is the same third heaven that Paul wasn't allowed to describe in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. He said it's not lawful for man to describe but now John is describing it because it's been given to him to show to us what things are going to happen. And so then the focus from chapter 6 on is back onto Israel and on the world. So when you think about consistency, I want to say that the pre-trib position, premillennial pre-trib position, is the only position that is consistent all the way through Scripture. And I'll point that out with an example. If my theory is true, right, the church is not the focus of the tribulation. It is now focused on the nation of Israel and what God does with the nations. You go back to Jeremiah 37 through 11, and he's talking about the time of Jacob's troubles. And when you get to 30:11, there is a passage, that passage says that God is going to destroy all the nations of the world and then discipline the nation of Israel. There's no mention of the church. In fact, there's no mention of the church from chapter 3 onward, or after chapter 3:20 or Revelation 3:22. You don't see the church mentioned anymore. John was told, or Jesus was using the word ecclesia for the church, and that word is used like 19 times in the first 3 chapters, but then it's not used again at all. It goes back to those who dwell upon the earth dwellers, the nations of the earth, the 144,000 Jewish male virgins from these tribes, and then the tribes are listed out. The exceptions being, I think, Dan and Ephraim are the only 2 mentioned that are not mentioned in those 12. And then you have the word saint, right? So there are saints that are going to be persecuted inside the tribulation, the 70th week. Yeah. But that word saint is kind of a generic term for a believer, because you see saints in the Old Testament.
Daniel, it's in the Old Testament, it's in Psalms. Yes.
You see saints in the New Testament, and you'll see saints in the Revelation after chapter 4. So that word saint is not specific to the church. The church is a very, very unique body of believers, and I don't think we really appreciate how unique the church is. In the Old Testament times, so God, this is one of the tenets of dispensationalism, like God never changes, but how he's dealt with mankind over time has changed. How he dealt with Adam and Eve before they sinned is different than how he dealt with them after they sinned. Yeah. He dealt with people differently before Noah's flood than he dealt with them after the flood.
Would it be fair to say that Jesus kept the church a bit of a secret until Paul? Because if you talk to a Jew in the Old Testament, if we were to go back in time, they wouldn't be caught dead saying that a Gentile is a joint heir with the Messiah. That's just not in their language at all.
No, absolutely. That would be anathema to them. They wouldn't even talk to Samaritans, and they were like half Jewish, like they didn't. If you weren't 100% Jewish and you couldn't trace your tribe, back. And now that changed obviously after 70 AD because they got scattered and they went into the diaspora. But God knows who they are. Like, it's no surprise. God knows where every single person. You may not even know what tribe you're from. Like, I have 1 or 2% Jewish DNA, I think. What tribe? I have no idea. I mean, there's just no way I could know that.
I kind of feel like Dan. Maybe. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. I'm just kidding. Military. Yeah, no. But yeah, no. It's interesting. It's a. I think this is one of the mysteries that Paul reveals to us about the church.
Yeah,
Special.
but think about it though. So the times of ignorance that I think Peter mentions was in the days before the law. So people didn't have the law to judge them, to be judged against. So they were in the time of ignorance. Now their evilness or their righteousness or whatever was solely predicated on a personal level. And it always is on a personal level when you get down to it. But in the broad sense, there was no, they had their conscience, right? They had the conscience that God put in their head. And that basically gives each of us kind of a morality barometer that we know certain things are just intuitively wrong. You know, it's wrong to kick a puppy. It's wrong to kill somebody. It's wrong to steal something that's not yours. Like you don't need religion to tell you that's wrong. Right. Even as a child may do something that's wrong and they kind of know it's wrong, but they don't have the sense to really kind of articulate that.
Yeah.
But the church is the focus all the way through until till Revelation 3:22, and then again we get to the things that come after. So the book of Revelation, believe it or not, is a pretty easy book to read. And when you just take it for what it says, like when you read Revelation 1:19, it said Jesus tells John, write the things you've seen. So what has he seen? He's seen Jesus, the glorified, in his glorified form there in chapter 1. And it was so overwhelming to John that he falls over as dead, right? Yep. Jesus has to go over there and restore him. The things which is the 7 letters to the 7 churches. And now this is 95 AD. John is an old man at this point, banished to the island of Patmos, a penal colony on Patmos by the Emperor Domitian. And
things that are coming.
Yeah. And then after he gets those 7 letters, then he says, and then after these things, that's how chapter 4 starts. After these things, after what things? After these churches, right? And those churches are representative of the church age. And because of I think that they're prophetic in the sense that there is a fourfold application to the church. There is a local, there are local body of believers there in the first century. So there's a historical sense. There's an individual, because Jesus is pointing out there's individual responsibilities in each of those churches. You know, he that has an ear, let him hear, kind of thing. And then you have the congregational, like as a group of
the
people
body
representing the church. And then you have the prophetic, and it's prophetic because of the order they're put in. And so you can compare those 7 letters to the last 2,000 years of church history, and you can see how they align up, right? Each of the major movements that happened through Christendom over the last 2,000 years, whether you're talking about the first century where you still had apostles alive that were going around and planting churches and teaching and doing all that. And then you had the next 2 centuries where the Roman Empire really cracked down on the churches. And that was 10 particular emperors that were doing this, all the way from Domitian to Diocletian. And Diocletian was the guy, I think, right before Constantine. And then you have Constantine comes in, he legalizes Christianity. Yeah. And this is where it marries up perfectly with the Church of Pergamum, where instead of the gospel going out into the world came into the church, kind of thing. Or instead of the church going out to the world sharing the gospel, the world came into the church. And that was that merging of the state, the church and the state there in Rome. And then Thyatira was the solidification of that system, the marrying of those 2 systems together. And that is indicative of the Roman Catholic system that has been ongoing for the last 1700 years, right?
Yep.
And then you have the Protestant Reformation with the Church of Sardis, the Church of Philadelphia, the First Great Awakening, and on. And a lot of these are overlapping. At least the last 4 churches are overlapping each other.
And now we're in
Laodicea, yeah. So
interesting. So based on that, we're kind of in that frame of the last stage kind of thing, I guess, again, lining up with what you're talking about here, 2026. Like it does, if you don't believe anything else we say, just look around at all the churches. It kind of feels a little bit lackadaisical.
I mean, every church, it's kind of like the end of Judges, man. Everybody's just doing what they think is right in their own eyes, you know, and that's how the church is. And that's how Laodicea is. The power, the name of the word Laodicea is the power of the people, or something to that effect. It's where we get the word Nike, because Nike comes out of,
I thought it's where we get the word lazy.
or yeah, it could be lukewarm, lazy. But, you know, Paul wrote 7 letters to 7 churches. And when you take away the duplicates and you take away the personal letters like Timothy and Philemon and Titus,
yeah.
But he wrote 7 letters to 7 churches. Then you have 7 mystery kingdom parables in Matthew 13. And I know I said that the gospels don't apply to the church, but Jesus is speaking of the church in a future tense, and he's talking about the church in its the kingdom in its mystery form, but not its final form. So in this church age, those parables align with Paul's letter, which align with Jesus' 7 letters. So each of those all fit on. You can marry them up all together, and they fit perfectly, and it just flows so perfectly together. So, you know, not to teach through the whole Bible or anything like that, but going back to Adam, we know that, you know, obviously he was the first man. We know that Jesus is the last Adam. We see that in 1 Corinthians 15. And in this time, we have 2,000 years from Adam to Abraham, roughly, you know, and we have 2,000 years from Abraham to Jesus. And now we are at 2,000 years since Christ's first coming. And the only one that's greater than Christ is no one, because it'll just be his first coming and then his second coming. But before that happens, Christ is going to remove his church, because when you look at, let me pull this up. There it is. When you look at the rapture and the second coming, there's too many distinct differences that they cannot be the same thing. Right. They cannot be the same event. There's too many different things that happen. And so Paul was given this particular mystery along with, I think, 7 other mysteries, or 12 mysteries.
Yes, 6 or 7 mysteries for sure that we can count.
And one in the rapture was a mysterion, right? Is a previously undisclosed truth. Yeah. So, you know, if this was an envelope, right, and I had this envelope in my hand, and I have a letter in here, or I have something in here, I know what it says, or I know what's in there. It could be a check for $1 million. It could be a check for $1.
Could be a cat that's dead or alive. We don't know.
I'm going to give it to you. It's kind of like that Schrodinger's cat, right? I'm going to give it to you, but you don't know what's in there. I know what's in there, but you don't. So it's not a mystery to me. It's not a mystery to God. It's a mystery to you, because you don't, as man, you don't know what it is yet. So Paul was given this mystery to explain the differences between to explain the rapture of the church, which removes the bride of Christ. And I was saying earlier how unique we are, except with these 2,000 years. Think about it. Christ came and fulfilled the law perfectly. And we find salvation in Christ, which means that we can't add to his perfect fulfillment of the law. There's not anything we can do to add to that, or else it becomes some type of a works-based salvation. So if I can't add to this free gift, which it's a free gift of salvation, I can't add anything to it. I can't take anything. I can't do anything to take away from that. If I'm truly born again, then according to Ephesians chapter 1, 11 through 14, Ephesians 4:30, 2 Corinthians 1, 21 and 22, you are sealed by the Holy Spirit until the day of redemption. You are a purchased possession of God. God owns you at that point, and you're his. And you and I are not stronger than God. We cannot outthink God. We can outmaneuver God. We can't out-scheme God. You know, so that is to say about the true nature of our salvation and how unique we are, because the law, in a sense, does not apply to us, because we've already found that righteousness of God through Christ. And since Christ had not yet come in the Old Testament, so those first 4,000 years, Christ hadn't come. So he hadn't come then. Did I knock myself out?
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Let's see. Let me go here. There it is. Sorry. But since Christ had not yet come in those first 4,000 years, they were still bound under either the law, or they're in the times of ignorance. And we live in this time where our Messiah, or our Lord Messiah, has already fulfilled the law. And when we get salvation in Him, we are now, from God's perspective, we are as righteous as God is, because we get the righteousness of God applied to us. And it's not anything that we do.
Right.
It's all about just repenting.
What He did.
I mean, turning from, changing your mind about salvation in the idea that we cannot save ourselves, that we can only find salvation in Jesus Christ and His finished work and His shed blood. It's all what He did. It's not anything we can do to add to that. I could be the best human for the next 50 years and be Mother Teresa on steroids, and just be just the absolute most caring, most giving, most loving, most praying, most tithing, most charity, do the most charities. None of that. That's all, as Jeremiah says, it's all filthy rags.
Yep.
All filthy rags. There's not anything we can add to what God's already done through Christ on the cross. With all that said, these seem to marry up with the days of creation. Day 4, for example, was the day that the sun, moon, and stars were created. Well, that was the 4,000th year. And, Jesus is called the light of the world, right? And in Malachi chapter 4, verse 2, He's called the Son of Righteousness, S-U-N, not S-O-N, the Son of Righteousness. And then you see that Christ saying, I am the light of the world. So it's not saying specifically that this is 100%, but everything seems to kind of line up with that. And then, with man being created on the 6th day, and we see the ultimate man coming, the Antichrist, whose number is what, 666, and 6 is the number of man, and that's 6 multiplied to the to the third power or whatever. He's going to be the most wicked man that's ever lived. So, and then the 7th day, we know, according to Exodus chapter 20, I think verse 11, that was the day of that was the Lord gave that commandment to Moses: honor the Sabbath day, for in 6 days you'll work, and on the 7th day you'll rest, as the Lord created the world in 6 days. So that was created, the Sabbath. God rested on the 7th day after creation, not because He needed to rest, but because He did that as an example for us. And speaking of just creation in general, God could have created everything in the blink of an eye. He could have just thought it, and everything would have just been created perfectly. He didn't need 6 days to do it. He's doing this for a particular reason. He's doing this for us, to show us the model of how long man's going to be on earth. Now, we didn't realize this until maybe 2,000 years ago. It started to dawn on us, like, hey, this seems to marry up with this and this. So this was a early church fathers kind of were beginning to toy around with this idea, and it, I can't find any fault in it, and so we won't really know until we go past this year, 2026, because this would put us 7 years just prior to 2033, which is the year that Christ was crucified here. So that 2,000 years would go from 33 AD to 2033 AD. Actually, no, this is a better one. So yeah, so that 2033, or that 33 AD here all the way to 2033 would be that 2,000 years. So just in breaking down things, like if you look at the last from 2026 through 2033, you have 7 years. And if that's barring no gap in time. There's no gap after the rapture and the start of the 70th week, because the rapture doesn't start the tribulation. It does start the day of the Lord, but it does not start the Daniel 70th week. The covenant that's confirmed in Daniel 9:27 is what starts the clock for the 70th week. So there's still a lot of unknowns that we don't know.
Yeah,
we know, for example, or I don't say not known, but I'm not 100% convinced that the rider on the white horse is the Antichrist himself. It could be the beast system that comes forth, right?
Right.
Because we know
4 horses. Yeah, for sure.
The 10 kings have to rise, and then the Antichrist rises from out amongst the 10. He rises up as the 11th the little horn, but it's the 11th horn. He subdues 3 and then becomes the 8th.
Right.
So I'm kind of Switzerland on the whole, whether it's the actual man, the Antichrist, or is it the system that he comes out?
Yeah, it kind of feels like it's mirroring Zechariah when the angel of the Lord is, or I think it was one of the angels saying, Zechariah, what are these? He's like, I don't know. It's like, yeah, they're the 4 horsemen, basically. So scattered all over the place. And what's going on in Revelation, it seems like the beginning of whatever is going to go on during the tribulation with the Antichrist and everything, that piece has to be taken. That's how I look at it. A white horse, piece taken, next horse, next horse, next horse. Otherwise, you're like 1 man, 2 man, 3 man, 4 man. It gets weird. And I like the idea. Yes, that's the Antichrist. I like that. But again, if we're looking at the symbol of what the horse represented, it means peace is extracted from the entire planet all at once. That's not necessarily an Antichrist type thing where he just does it one day. But if we're talking about a system of everything under the headship of the Antichrist and all that stuff, I have no problem. These 4 horses all tie together nicely. And then now we get the seals open and here we go. Ding, 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 ring the bell.
Yeah. We also don't know if the horsemen ride all the way through the entirety of the 70th week, because we know the rider, or at least the white horse, seems to ride all the way through all 7 years. So what would be more troubling, what would be even more troubling about the tribulation than what we already know about it, is if in the opening of the first 4 seals, or even the opening of all the seals, if they are cumulative. So you open the first seal, second seal, third seal, and they stay open, and then you open up the trumpet judgments, and then you open up, and still you're feeling the impacts of it's like compounding upon each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Like I've shared in one of my videos that when you read what Paul talks about, a great desolation and all this kind of stuff, Jesus compared it to the flood before the ark, or before the flood. Like there's a great delusion that's happening, all this stuff, and this time frame is going to be very similar to that delusion. Instead of water, now there's going to be something else, I believe, spiritually going on, where it gets worse, where deception increases all the way until when Jesus Christ shows up. And if he didn't show up, I don't think there'd be anyone left on the planet at all. Everybody would be deceived. Everybody would be destroyed. And he shows up on Earth, and it's like, oh, wow, I guess I'm a little bit late.
Yeah. Well, we also don't know if we don't know if where it says no flesh would survive, if the mark would be forced on people, or how that changes the flesh, or how that changes humanity and taking that. But I saw a question from do you do questions on here or no?
Yep, we can do that if you want.
Well, I saw one from K Gone of the 99. Pete, how long do you think the gap is going to be between the rapture happening and Daniel's 70th week being kicked off, Daniel 9th? I used to think the gap would be a long time. I was under the mentorship of Don Koenig years and years ago. And he used to think, well, he had always thought that the second coming would happen in the 2030s. So this was like 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And it was not a very popular opinion, to say that the second coming was still like 20 something years off back then, because back then everybody was like, ooh, 2011, that's 7 years from 2018. That's the 70th anniversary of Israel. I mean, so 2012, you had the Mayan calendar stuff. You had the blood moons in 2014 and 15. Then you had the 2017 sign. I mean, so every year or two, there's some kind of new thing, right? And I was influenced by him very early on. And so I would say probably 2009 and 10, I already kind of aligned myself with Don's thinking that the second coming would not be until the 2030s. However, back then I could think, well, you could have a gap of like 10 years. It could be a gap of 10 years. We don't know. But the closer that the further that we push through time, and now we're kind of pushing into this area where all the technology that needs to exist inside of the 70th week already kind of exists. And even if you look at something like the Mark of the Beast, if you go back to like the 1980s or 90s, where people were thinking it was the barcode, right? And then RFID chips came out, and then there was that. And so now, it's not how the Antichrist or how the Mark of the Beast will happen. It's which way. Like there's so many different options, that could happen. So I don't know if the rapture is this year. I think I am convinced though that 2033 factors into the 70th week somehow. What we don't know yet is whether it's the middle, beginning, or end. It could be the point, So if that's true, the rapture could still happen this year, but the gap would be considerably shorter.
Yeah.
And I looked up the other day, I got on Grok, I think it was Grok and ChatGPT, just to check both of them against each other. And I asked the question, I put all the parameters in there, like, okay, let's say that we want to make Iraq, where ancient Babylon was, let's say Baghdad or somewhere just south of Baghdad. We want to make that the economic, cultural powerhouse of the world with port access to the Persian Gulf, trade routes, high-speed internet. And by the way, all the neighboring nations and locals are 100% on board with this. Nobody's fighting it. In fact, the whole world supports its efforts, and everybody pitches in to make this happen. How long would it take to make Babylon? How long would it take to rebuild Babylon inside of Iraq? And Grok said at a minimum it would be 5 years, but that would just be at the very bare minimum. You're looking more really between 8 to 12 years for Babylon to be rebuilt and to become really the dominant powerhouse in the Middle East. And ChatGPT gave it quite a bit longer. It was saying 15 years before it's functional, and up to 20 to 25 years. So and I'm saying like every nation is helping out. Everybody is 100% on board with building it. Like, what's the fastest it could be built? Yeah. So I think either way, I'm torn on a lot of things, but like I kind of think the U.S. could be Babylon.
How long would that take for that to be kind of a major power if Babylon was actually the United States of America? It seems like it would be like that.
Like instantly, yeah. I mean, it would not take very long. So there's a lot of factors that go into the gap and into determining how long the gap would take. And I think God is long-suffering, as it says in 2 Peter 3, and he's going to give everybody a chance until the fullness of the Gentiles comes in. And we don't know, God knows what that number is, but there's some Gentile. He's going to be the last Gentile, or he or she is going to be the last Gentile that gets saved.
It's interesting you mentioned, I think it's in Hebrews, talking about all the Israelites coming in to the promised land. The ones that couldn't come in were the ones that were in unbelief. So Paul makes mention of that too. I believe Paul wrote Hebrews. I have no problem with that. But talks about the idea that why was it? Why couldn't they enter in? Well, it's because of unbelief. And as soon as Moses died, there was a transition. He basically passed the baton on to Joshua, and then they entered into the promised land. All those that were under the age of 20, they all went in. All of them, that next generation went in. So if you're thinking about the church, maybe it just takes one person. Maybe the last person is Trump to get saved. I'm just kidding. I don't know.
Yeah, you never know.
People are like, he is a Christian. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if he is or not. That's not my beef. Yeah, that's not my thing to die on. But let's say there is one person on the planet that needs to be saved, and then bammo, off we go. Could get killed, could get martyred. We don't know what happened. They just all of a sudden go to church one day, get saved, and time's up.
Here's another one. It says, if the angels in heaven do not breed, how is it that fallen ones can and did? So we know that in Hebrews it says that there's times we may have entertained angels unaware. We know that angels can appear as men because they showed up to Sodom and Gomorrah to take Lot and his family out, and so they looked as men, but they apparently were very good looking because all the gay dudes there were trying to get some. And so
we to look at it.
we know that angels can eat. Because in Genesis 18 on the plains of Mamre, I think a pre-incarnate Christ with these two angels came and they ate with Abram. Mm-hmm. So it's not that the Bible doesn't say they can't; it says they don't, and that's the holy angels, not the unholy angels. So the unholy angels aren't bound under that sense of divine morality or anything that we are, or that the unholy angels or the holy angels are still adhere to that because. Somebody had asked a question earlier, but angels, it's not that angels don't have free will. They do. There's just no mechanism for salvation for them. So once they sin once, they're done. And they know that.
And there's no promise that they need to multiply or no commandment giving that we see. Hey, go be fruitful and multiply. That was man. That's towards man. So again, we don't know how they were built to breed or whatever it is, but Judah, the book of the letter from Judah says they left their first estate or first state, which is kind of interesting that they did something. They crossed over a line that was forbidden, and once they made that decision, they've entered into eternity based on that decision and are chained underground until a future judgment date. That's the easiest way I can reconcile it. I don't know about the breeding and all that stuff, but you can't get away from Genesis. What is it? Genesis 6, where basically the sons of God come down to the daughters of men and they took them wives. You don't say that unless that's something sexual going on there. And then this is where we get Nephilim. This is where we get all these giants from. And I think it's also hinted at that in the future, there's going to be giants as well. If we're going back to the time of before the flood, if we're going to look like that kind of atmosphere, we got to have giants. As far as I know, they're not here unless you're talking about the Florida Mall or something like that. But we could be very close to that.
They're in Florida, yeah.
In Florida, they're just rampant over there. But yeah.
But yeah, the thing too about angels is that we don't know. They can manifest and look like humans, so we don't know if that means they have all the working parts and everything. Presumably they do because they were able to procreate, and these offspring were giants. I don't think we'll see giants in these last days because I don't think they serve any kind of pragmatic function. Back in the ancient times, if you're limited to swords and spears and shields and stuff, a giant is a formidable opponent. But if you're in the 21st century where you can take out a giant from like a mile away with a high-powered 50 cal.
Right. So maybe some kind of somebody drinking Nephilim juice and having superpowers are mixed with whatever.
I think it's like Captain America, kind of like that kind of augmentation where you're
super soldiers and that kind of
super powered or superhuman capabilities, but you don't have to be 10 feet tall or anything like that.
Right. Yeah.
Do that.
Well, that makes sense.
So what else you got?
We covered a lot of territory today.
we covered a lot of territory.
Yeah. You know what I would like to do is I would like to have you on more often. That's what I would like to do instead of once a year or once every 6 months. But I do appreciate your time, and I know you're a busy man. And maybe usually what I do is kind of like final thoughts, kind of like if there's something that we missed or whatever, something that you like for my audience or whatever that they can maybe do some research on or something like that that's kind of interesting in your wheelhouse. And then also to my audience, don't forget to, even though a percentage of my audience is made up from Pete Garcia's channel because they came over here. So thank you for that. But don't forget to go to Rev 310, and you still go live on Mondays, right?
Yep.
Mondays kind of thing. Yeah. So go check out Pete Garcia's channel. Make sure to subscribe, comment, all this kind of stuff on his show. So, okay, this is Sunday. We're in April. What do you think things are going to shake out over the next week or so? It feels like it stalls, it goes up. Hey, we're going to do this because there's like a 2 week kind of a ceasefire. I think last I heard Trump say, like, hey, 2 weeks, you got 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I don't know. What are we looking at here in the next? Not that you're prophetic or something like that, and you got a crystal ball in front of you. But what do you think in the next couple of weeks? Yeah, is going to be happening. What are you kind of keeping your eye on?
I'm looking for a peace deal to come out of this. So I've been saying from the get-go of this that Trump wasn't going to put in ground troops. At most, he would put them on Carb Island to take it or destroy it. But he is not looking to put boots on the ground inside of Iran itself, other than the rescues that they did, and maybe some clandestine operations to get weapons to the civilians. But they had already given weapons to the civilians. They gave them to the Kurds, and the Kurds kept them all. The Iraqi Kurds kept all the weapons. So that was like 2 months ago.
Wow.
We're good on them because the Kurds are like, that's another beleaguered people group. But I don't know. I think that where we are right now is they went to Islamabad to negotiate with Ghalibah and the other delegates from Iran, but those guys aren't in control of the IRGC. So the IRGC, the way that they're created and to function, is to become very decentralized. Once a decapitation strike happens, and if the Ayatollah is taken out or the head, no matter how many people we take on the levels, the lower levels are still. These are the most radicalized. The most.
It's like Hydra or something. You cut the head. It's just like Captain America all over again.
So I think we went there not necessarily as a good faith thing, but to show the world, like, hey, you can't negotiate with these guys. And then they pulled this stunt with the mining the Strait of Hormuz, so that you have to go along the coastline of Iran, and then you're going to get absconded by their little speedboats they still have left, and you got to pay this toll. So that just showed the world that these people are unacceptable. I saw a tweet earlier. I can't verify the veracity of it. It sounds too good to be true, but we'll wait and see. But basically, when Trump was toying with the idea of a ceasefire or some kind of a peace deal, Mohammed bin Salman from Saudi Arabia was like calling him like, hey, you're already there. Just finish the job. Finish the job. If you finish the job, we'll normalize relations with Israel. We'll invest $100 billion in blah, blah, blah. So it sounds too good, but we'll have to wait and see if that's what really happened. But I can see a lot of the Gulf nations telling them that, because they've already shown how just unhinged and destabilizing Iran is under the IRGC. They want to see some type of either secular or very, middle of the road Islamic country government take over. But presumably they could be secular or just non-radicalized or whatever. So with Trump in Venezuela, for example, he did not need to remove the entire government, because he did not want what happened in Iraq in 2003 to happen here, where we took out all of Saddam's government basically, and basically you just kind of turn into anarchy, and you have all these militia groups start breaking out. So he didn't want that with Venezuela. So they left Delcy, whatever her name is, Delcy something. So she was Maduro's vice president, but she's playing ball. So that's all he cares about. And Trump is operating from like this Jacksonian model of governance, where it's strategic alignments. It has nothing to do with being the world's policeman. It doesn't have anything to do, like, all that's changing. That we're not going to be the world's policeman anymore. We're not going to be the world's we've basically been on Europe's leash all this time, to go do whatever. And now it's going to be all about what basically serves America's interest, strategic interest. And this idea is called Fortress America. I did some presentations on this, but I think his main goal for the Middle East is the Abraham Accords. So whatever he's got to do to get Iran to come to heel, And once they surrender and he can bring them in, or even if he doesn't bring them in, but once that is ended, the IRGC is ended, Saudi would join the Abraham Accords, and then they would be followed by, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman.
So this is going to show a little bit of my weakness with some of the politics in the Middle East, but where does Pakistan fit into this? Why are they like a mediator? How did that happen?
I don't know. It's maybe they were trying to play some kind of a role, maybe to curry favor with America. I don't know, but yeah, it didn't end up working out very much for anybody in that sense, because the guys that were negotiating don't have the means to control the forces on the ground to stop them from. They don't have the military or political power to stop these guys. The IRGC basically answered to the Ayatollah alone, and if Mojka Khamenei, I think is his name, Mojka. I think he's incapacitated. I think he might be in a coma, or he's dead, or he's not calling any shots. He's not in the ability to call any shots right now. So basically, nobody's running Iran. It's just a bunch of different warlords kind of trying to come up with some kind of a game plan. But Trump then said, hey, all right, you're going to keep the mines straight. You're not going to tell us where these mines are. We'll sweep the mines, but we're going to close the Strait of Hormuz. So you're not getting anything. You're not getting any money. You're not getting any toll money. You're not getting anything. And the Houthis, they said, hey, we're going to join with Iran. They fired a couple of missiles, or a couple of those like little RPGs or whatever. But that's really, they're not really, they already see this as a losing fight, that they're not going to throw their hat into that and go down with the sinking ship of the IRGC. So Bab el Mandeb Strait should stay open for the Red Sea. And then Somaliland, which is a breakaway from Somalia, they've been a functioning government democracy since the 90s. Israel just recognized them, and they're directly opposite of Yemen. So it could be that we begin putting forces in there with the Israelis and keep the Houthis in check that way. But I'm looking for a peace deal to come out of this. So I knew from the beginning that Trump wasn't going to put boots on the ground. He sent the 82nd Airborne. That's a light division. If you're going to put boots on the ground in the Middle East, you have to have a heavy division with tanks and strikers and up armored vehicles and all sorts of stuff that we just never moved over there. 82nd, 101st Airborne, those are very light divisions. You would not use them for taking over a country. You don't have any of the other resources in play. But because he blockaded the Strait of Hormuz, because they mined the strait, everybody's buying oil from the U.S. So the U.S. is, happy camper at that point. I'd like to see the gas prices come back down, but
yeah, for sure.
I don't know what it is in Canada. What's the gas up there? You guys pay by liter.
Yeah, we pay in liters, so it's $1.72 depending where you are. I think it's over $2 in BC, and in Eastern, I think it's even higher than us. You'd think we're like an oil town. We're like Texas. Our gas should almost be free, but it's gone up as well. So what is? I'll figure out what is. Is it, liters to gallons? I forget how many gallons it is. Is it 4 liters in a gallon?
Man, I don't use the metric system. I have no idea.
Let's see. I thought it was like 4, just under 4 gallons, but yeah, so 4.45. So 1 liter is 0.45 gas, so that's almost half a gallon for 1 point.
So almost five Canadian dollars per gallon. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that would be fair, somewhere in that range. So what is it for you guys? Is it like $7 or something, or?
It's $3. I paid $3.25 here the other day, Friday.
When I lived in Minnesota in the 90s for a year, in the 90s, it was $1.17. I don't know why that stood out for me, but I remember it because it was the first time I saw gallons. I'm like, that's weird. And for us in Canada, it was 42 cents. per liter. So there's your kind of range.
Yeah.
So when we come across the border to back into Calgary, 42 cents. And I was like, oh man, you go to Saskatchewan, it's like 60, 70 cents. It's ridiculous. So,
well, this was like we're basically back to the prices it was under Biden. For the 4 years under Biden, the gas was over $3 most everywhere. So it wasn't until the last year that they tapped into their strategic reserve to bring the prices down for the election. But it was mostly like over $3. So this is kind of Biden era gas prices. But yeah, so
Trump says gas has come down though in his press conferences. Like, gas has never been cheaper, and I'm like, where are you looking?
Well, I mean, it was before all this. It was, I was paying $2. I think I was paying like $2.25 or something per gallon.
Okay.
So, yeah, that would be what, like 55 cents in Canadian per liter, or 55 cents per liter, something like that.
Yeah, that is actually pretty cheap.
Or 56 cents. Yeah, something like that. But
yeah,
per liter. But yeah, man, it's so weird metric. Like when we were in Australia a couple of years ago with Tom Hughes and the conference down there, I went to go work out at the gym and everything was like in kilograms. I was like, what the, like, I was like, I had to like pick it up and like hold it in my hands, like, either that or pull out my phone and Google like, what is 37.5 kilograms? So I'm like, I don't know.
There was a skit on Saturday Night Live a long time ago about, I think it was like a guy playing George Washington or whatever, talking about, it's going to be a foot, but not in yards, and, and all the measurements and everything. And I'm like, this is so funny because it actually feels like you guys are complicated when it comes to that.
So, yeah, that was Nate Bargatze was that. Yeah, that was.
They're all on the boat. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple of them that were super funny.
Yeah. But that's it. But you're right. Yeah, it's confusing. Yeah. But you know what? Thank you for being on here. I really appreciate it. I love just having a chat with you. This is totally unscripted, and we just kind of have fun spitballing and that kind of thing. So I really appreciate it. If you don't mind sticking around in the background, in the back, I'll just say goodbye to everyone, and thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it. Awesome.
To everybody, I'll be on tomorrow night. So if y'all want to, I'm doing the mysteries. So we'll be talking about it's fresh on my mind because I was getting all my notes and stuff for today earlier. But so yeah.
What time is that? What time is that going to be on in your show, on your channel, roughly?
In American time, it's 8 p.m. I think. I don't know what it is in Canadian time. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Well, we're Mountain Standard here in Alberta. What are you? Central?
Central.
Are you Central? Okay. Cool. But yeah, thank you, bro. I'll just say goodbye to everyone here.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so now that he's gone, we can have a chat. No, that was fantastic to have Pete Garcia. I love sharing my thoughts with him, and then I love listening to how he talks about end times. I hope you guys thought this was a real treat today as well. Please share this video with other people as well. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, because for some reason YouTube is notorious for unsubscribing people, especially when we start talking about end times and all that good stuff. So thank you. Don't forget to check out Pete Garcia's channel, Rev 310. So again, thank you guys for being on the show, and for watching the show. This has been fantastic, and I'll see you guys in another video. Bye for now.
You don't see it coming? What you go is safe. What you go is known. One silent shift shatters what you know. Like Swan. You won't see it coming. Like is already moving. This is Black Swan Revelations.